The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. The Lives of the Dead. But this too is true. Stories can save us. I'm 43 years old and a writer now, and even still right here, I keep dreaming Linda alive, and Ted Lavender too, and Kiowa, and Kurt Lemon, and a slim young man I killed, and an old man sprawled beside a pig pen, and several others whose bodies I once lifted and dumped into a truck. They're all dead, but in a story which is a kind of dreaming, the dead sometimes smile and sit up and return to the world. Start here. A body without a name. On an afternoon in 1969, the platoon took sniper fire from a filthy little village along the South China Sea. It lasted only a minute or two and nobody was hurt. But even so, Lieutenant Jimmy Cross got on the radio and ordered up an airstrike. For the next half hour, we watched the place burn. It was a cool, bright morning, like early autumn, and the jets were glossy black against the sky. When it ended, we formed into a loose line and swept east through the village. It was all wreckage. I remember the smell of burnt straw. I remember broken fences and torn up trees and heaps of stone and brick and pottery. The place was deserted, no people, no animals, and the only confirmed kill was an old man who lay face up near a pig pen at the center of the village. His right arm was gone. At his face there were already many flies and gnats. Dave Jensen went over and shook the old man's hand. "Howdy do," he said. One by one the others did too. They didn't disturb the body, they just grabbed the old man's hand and offered a few words and moved away. Rat Kiley bent over the corpse. "Gimme 5, he said. "A real honor." "Pleased as punch," said Henry Dobbins. I was a brand new to the war. It was my 4th day. I hadn't yet developed a sense of humor. Right away, as if I'd swallowed something, I felt a moist sickness rise up in my throat. I sat down beside the pig pen, closed my eyes, put my head between my knees. After a moment, Dave Jensen touched my shoulder. "Be polite now," he said. "Go introduce yourself. Nothing to be afraid about. Just a nice old man. Show a little respect for your elders." "No way. Maybe it's too real for you." "That's right," I said. "Way too real." Jensen kept after me, but I didn't go near the body. I didn't even look at it except by accident. For the rest of the day there was still that sickness inside me, but it was the old man's corpse, so much it was that awesome act of greeting the dead. At one point I remember they sat at the body up against a fence. They crossed his legs and talked to him. "The guest of honor," Mitchell Sanders said, and he placed a can of orange slices in the old man's lap. "Be it vitamin C," he said gently. "A guy's health, that's the most important thing." They proposed toasts, they lifted their canteens and drank to the old man's family and ancestors, his many grandchildren, his newfound life after death. It was more than mockery. There was a formality to it, like a funeral without the sadness. Dave Jensen flicked his eyes at me. "Hey, O'Brien," he said. "You got a toast in mind? Never too late for manners." I found things to do with my hands. I looked away and tried not to think. Late in the afternoon, just before dusk, Kiowa came up and asked if he could sit at my foxhole for a minute. He offered me a Christmas cookie from a batch his father had sent him. It was February now, but the cookies tasted fine. For a few moments Kiowa watched the sky. "You did a good thing today," he said. "That shaking hand crap, it isn't decent. The guys'll hassle you for a while, especially Jensen, but just keep saying no. Should have done it myself. Takes guts, I know that." "It wasn't guts. I was scared." Kiowa shrugged. "Same difference." "No, I couldn't do it. A mental block or something. I don't know, just creepy." "Well, you're new here. You'll get used to it." He paused for a second, studying the green and red sprinkles on a cookie. "Today I guess this was your first look at a real body?" I shook my head. All day long I've been picturing Linda's face, the way she smiled. "It sounds funny," I said, "but the poor old man, he reminds me of, there's this girl I used to know. I took her to the movies once, my first date." Kyo looked at me for a long while, then he leaned back and smiled. "Man," he said, "that's a bad date." Linda was 9 then, and I was, but we were in love, and it was real. When I write about her now, 3 decades later, it's tempting to dismiss it as a crush and infatuation of childhood. But I know for a fact that what we felt for each other was as deep and rich as love could ever get. It had all the shadings and complexities of mature adult love, and maybe more, because there were not yet words for it, and because it was not yet fixed to comparisons of chronologies or the way by which adults measure such things. I just loved her. She had a poise and great dignity. Her eyes, I remember, were deep brown like her hair, and she was slender and very quiet and fragile looking. Even then, at 9 years old, I wanted to live inside her body. I wanted to melt into her bones, that kind of love. And so in the spring of 1956, when we were in the fourth grade, I took her out on the first real date of my life, a double date actually, with my mother and father. Though I can't remember the exact sequence, my mother had somehow arranged it with Linda's parents, and on that damp spring night my dad did the driving, while Linda and I sat in the back seat and stared out opposite windows, both of us trying to pretend it was nothing special. For me, though, it was very special. Down inside, I had important things to tell her, big, profound things, but I couldn't make any words come out. I had trouble breathing. Now and then I glanced over at her, thinking how beautiful she was, her white skin and those dark brown eyes, and the way she always smiled at the world. Always, it seemed, as if her face had been designed that way. The smile never went away. That night I remember she wore a new red cap, which she seemed to be very stylish and sophisticated, very unusual. It was a stocking cap, basically, except the tapered part at the top seemed extra long, almost too long, like a tail growing out of the back of her head. It made me think of the caps that Santa Claus's elves wear, the same shape and color, the same fuzzy white tassel at the tip. Sitting there in the back seat, I wanted to find some way to let her know how I felt, a compliment of some sort, but all I could manage was a stupid comment about the cap. Geez, I must have said, what a cap. Linda smiled at the window. She knew what I meant, but my mother turned and gave me a hard look. It surprised me. It was as if I brought up some terrible secret. For the rest of the ride, I kept my mouth shut. We parked in the front of the Ben Franklin store and walked up Main Street toward the State Theater. My parents went first, side by side, and then Linda in her new red cap, and then me, tailing along 10 or 20 steps behind. I was 9 years old. I didn't yet have the gift for small talk. Now and then my mother glanced back, making little motions with her hands to speed me up. At the ticket booth, I remember Linda stood off to one side. I moved over to the concession area, studying the candy, and both of us were very careful to avoid the awkwardness of eye contact, which was how we knew about being in love. It was a pure knowing. Neither of us, I suppose, would have thought to use that word love, but by the fact of not looking at each other and not talking, we understood with a clarity beyond language that we were sharing something huge and permanent. Behind me in the theater, I heard cartoon music. Hey, step it up, I said. I almost had the courage to look at her. You want popcorn or what? The thing about a story is that you dream it as you tell it, hoping that others might then dream along with you. And in this way, memory and imagination and language combine to make spirits in the head. There is the illusion of aliveness. In Vietnam, for instance, Ted Lavender had a habit of popping 4 or 5 tranquilizers every morning. It was his way of coping, just dealing with the realities, and the drugs helped to ease him through the days. I remember how peaceful his eyes were. Even in bad situations, he had a soft, dreamy expression. I even on his face, which was what he wanted, a kind of escape. How's the war today? Somebody would ask, and Ted Lavender would give a little smile to the sky and say, mellow, a nice smooth war today. And then in April he was shot in the head outside the village of Tonke. Kiowa and I and a couple of others were ordered to prepare his body for the dust-off. I remember squatting down, not wanting to look, but then looking. Lavender's left cheekbone was gone. There was a swollen blackness around his eye. Quickly, trying not to feel anything, we went through the kid's pockets. I remember wishing I had gloves. It wasn't the blood I hated, it was the deadness. We put his personal effects in a plastic bag and tied the bag to his arm. We stripped off the canteens and ammo, all this heavy stuff, and wrapped him up in his own poncho, and carried him out to a dry paddy and laid him down. For a while nobody said much. Then Mitchell Sanders laughed and looked over at the green plastic poncho. Hey, Lavender, he said, how's the war today? There was a short quiet. Mellow, somebody said. Well, that's good, Sanders murmured. That's real good. Stay cool now. Hey, no sweat. I'm mellow. Just ease on back then. Don't need no pills. We got the incredible chopper on call. This once-in-a-lifetime mine trip. Oh yeah, mellow. Mitchell Sanders smiled. There it is, my man. This chopper's gonna take you up high and cool. Gonna relax you. Gonna alter your whole perspective on this sorry shit. We almost we could almost see Ted Lavender's dreamy blue eyes. We could almost hear him.